guys, how's it going? Today I want to show you 6 different container combinations that are really beautiful and performed really well for us last year out in our garden. So I'm hoping by showing you these it might give you some ideas or inspiration for this year, and for those of you who are beginners, maybe it'll kind of steer you towards some things that go really well together, because I find in containers I kind of have mixed results every year. Sometimes I win big time and I find a combination that works really well and it's gorgeous, and sometimes things just don't pan out, and that's just the nature of it. As you're learning what plants can go well together, you're going to have some really successful things and some things that just, anyway. These 6 worked out. The first 2 container ideas actually came from proven winners in their 2023 National Recipes of the Year. They usually come out with 3 of those. We planted all 3 of them last spring-ish, I think it was May. And I particularly loved 2. They performed really well for us and I loved the colors. So the first one is Misty Seas. Now this one I was unsure of in the beginning because there is a Supertunia Mini Vista Violet Star, which is a purple and white striped petunia. I'm not drawn to striped petunias, so I planted it thinking, well, I like the colors, but we'll see how this plays out. There was also Supertunia Mini Vista White and Supertunia Mini Vista Indigo, which Indigo is one of my fave Supertunias, all surrounding a Graceful Grasses Blue Mohawk Juncus, which I also didn't have a tremendous amount of experience with. I liked the color combination as a whole. It was very cooling, but as this thing grew, I was kind of stunned. I was stunned by how these plants grew together. Now the pots I put them in, they were like resin wicker pot look-alike containers. I want to say they were maybe, 18 to 20 inch openings. We put 1 grass in the center and 2 of each kind of Supertunia. So there was 6 altogether around this grass, and those grew into an absolute sphere of color. They intermixed beautifully, and I think having that striped petunia, I didn't even notice it was a stripe because it was marrying the other 2 colors together in one flower. And the grass bulked up hugely. It looked like a giant firework coming out from all different directions. It wasn't like super bold like a purple fountain grass, but sometimes I don't want that boldness. I want a little bit of textural difference. I want some vertical interest, but I don't want it to overwhelm what's going on below. Although that combination of color, I'm not sure that any kind of centerpiece can overwhelm that, but I never trimmed those, not one time. We do have to spray our Supertunias and Superbells for budworm. We have to do that on a weekly basis, otherwise the budworms come and eat all of the flower buds on our plants, so we have a nice green healthy looking plant but no flowers. So that's something that not all of you guys will have to deal with, but that's something we do. So it was being sprayed weekly with BT. And then we do fertilize weekly. So that's the care that this pot was given. They are also on a drip system, so they get consistent water at the same time every day, and the results were spectacular. I really liked that. The second one is the Acapulco Sun, which is a very tropical kind of sunset sort of look. The thing I loved about this one is that they used a stratosphere white Gara as a centerpiece, which I'd never really thought about using a Gara as a centerpiece, and it really fit in with the vegetable garden. Flanking the opening and then taking off from either side is a hedge of sweet romance lavender. So when that romance lavender was in full bloom, we got the purple there, and then we had the beautiful Gara just adding this kind of whimsical touch to the area. And then down below it was the Super Bean Peachy Keen, Supertunia Bermuda Beach, and Superbells Coralina. Everything did really well. Now Superbells are a little bit touch and go for me. You know how you have that one plant that you really want to grow and you just struggle? I usually struggle with that one in mixed containers, but I didn't this time. They just did really well. They got full sun all day long, and they get that heat off of the gravel lane, which is right in front of it, and they still performed beautifully. So I was just very happy with those 2 combinations in particular. And if you are a beginner and you just have no idea what to put together, or if you're seasoned and want some inspiration, I spend a lot of time on Proven Winners website looking at all their container gardening ideas. I think you go to provenwinners.com and then gardening ideas, and then there's like a container recipe search. I don't know if my verbiage is right on that, but anyway, I don't even know, hundreds and hundreds of ideas on the website showing you what things go together. The second containers that I loved were actually window boxes. So they were in our Portico area. That's always a really fun space to plant for me. I really like to do that one because I can get away with a lot of shade loving stuff. It does get a little bit of morning sun, and then the rest of the day it's protected. It's also protected from the better part of our wind. It's on the east side of the house, so our prevailing winds usually come from the west, so usually they're a little bit more protected, so the plants stay fairly nice. I had some Woodwardia chain ferns left over in there from the previous year, and not all of them had the same growth. Like some of them were much bigger than others, and I noticed when I planted it initially, everything was bone dry. So I thought, well, once I water these things, I think they'll catch up with one another. So I left all the ferns in there and added in a ton of stuff. Golden Dreams coleus, which is one of my fave coleus plants. I love that variety. Let's see, I picked up some just yellow begonias. I'm not even sure they had a fancy name. They were yellow begonias with green leaves, and then there was some coral impatiens that you just buy in the 6-packs. And then what else did I put in there? We put some Creeping Jenny, which was a variety I'd never seen before. It had really big leaves on it, but it was labeled Creeping Jenny. And then also some Hippo Red polka dot plants. And that was one that in the very beginning I thought, ooh, do I like this? Do I like this color combination? And it took about, I don't know, that evening, and then I just had fallen in love with it. I just kept looking at it and I just kept loving it more and more. And the containers that are right by those window boxes, I ended up putting a couple of big palms in there, which kind of mimicked the fern texture a little bit loosely. And so that was a very dramatic kind of southern look to me on a porch. Is that southern? Is that a thing? It looked southern to me. And then I repeated the Hippo Red polka dot plants, the coral impatiens, and the Creeping Jenny. So it kind of drew some of that interest over. But those window boxes performed really, really well for us all summer long. I had good color because the impatiens and begonias both like the shade. And then the polka dot plant added some depth in there, and the Creeping Jenny added that kind of drapey, softening effect. I really loved those. I also packed those containers very full. Usually for shade containers, I do that because shade plants typically don't put on quite as much growth as your sun containers will. So, pack them in tight, and they look beautiful from day one, and they really looked beautiful for the rest of the season as well. And then speaking of coleus, the next set of containers were near our chicken coop. I used Velveteen coleus, Limetime coleus, Icicles helichrysum, which is usually labeled full sun, but they did really well for me in this part sun. One of them gets a little more sun than the other, but they both performed really well. I also used a Black Mamba petunia, which, it's more like just a little mounding petunia, but has the black blooms, along with a Senpatiens compact white, a variegated Swedish ivy, a plectranthus. I'm trying to remember what else I had in there. A raven sweet potato vine. So there was a lot of stuff. These pots, I think, did I already mention they were about a 20-inch opening? And the Color Blaze coleus, especially if they get a lot of light, they grow huge. These planters, you guys, I took pictures of them even. I think I've got a picture when the weeping willow kind of behind the Hartley had started to color up just a little bit. It was really late in the season, and these planters were just amazing. I kind of want to plant them exactly the same this year. And maybe they looked extra awesome because they were right next to an area that I'm looking at right now that's still a big dirt patch. We took up the brick patio in that area. So they were a really softening, beautiful little touch right to that spot that, for the most part didn't look that great. But those plants did really well with each other. And I was thankful that the petunia and the plectranthus and the helichrysum, those things that want full sun, still did really well in a spot that got quite a bit of shade, and that spot gets a ton of wind. And I didn't have any branches break off the coleus, anything like that happen. And the next set of containers, which maybe I should have talked about these right after the window boxes, but they sit right in front of our portico. There was a grouping of 3 containers, one on either side of our kind of big opening, our walkway there. And I tried to use some similar colors in those containers as I had in the window boxes, but these planters get a lot more sun. So I used as a centerpiece in the tall pot, Toucan Yellow Canna. And then I can't remember, I think I had Superbell's Coralina in there. In the lower pots, we had Wicked Witch Coleus, which is a dark colored coleus with kind of a green margin, but they're really kind of fluffy. I don't know if that's the right word, fluffy on the edges. And then there's Supertunia rather, Mini Vista Yellow, which is a brand new variety for this year. Supertunia Persimmon, new variety for this year. Luscious Citron Lantana, Queen Tut. If you find a Queen Tut, you should grow it. It's my favorite of all the tuts. I just loved that grass this last year. I also tossed a bright blue lobelia in there, which in the beginning I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, that's kind of throwing everything off, but then I sort of started to love it. It did end up fizzling out. Everything, you know, I had it next to some Vista Supertunias, which was my number one thing I did wrong. While it looked beautiful, the Supertunias eventually kind of took it over toward the end of the season, but those containers rocked through the whole year. They looked so good. Even through several different frosts we got in the fall, they still looked awesome. Even the Raven sweet potato vine lasted. And again, we're on the east side of the house where they're a little bit more protected from wind. That could, you know, keep those plants nicer a little bit longer through the season. But I felt like the colors between the window boxes and the pots up front was really nice. You know, with the yellow begonias in the window box, the yellow canna supertunia, and the lantana in there looked great together. Then we had the coral impatiens up in the window box area, along with the persimmon supertunia, which has kind of a corally vibe. It's a little darker than that. But then I also had the Superbells corallina in there, which brought some of that color. So we had, they married together very well, and I was just very happy with the performance of those plants, especially for something that when I put it together in the beginning, I thought, we'll see. It ended up being something I really loved. And the last container that I loved was actually down at our local community college. You know, we plant a bunch of flower beds and flower containers down there in the spring, and we had in a couple of their really long rectangular planters, and I want to say they're like 68 inches long and like 14 inches deep. I don't know if it's been a while since we planted them, but what we put in there in the very beginning, I think I even talked about faith in planting and how some of these plants will grow so quick and fill in that you don't want to overcrowd them, especially in the sun areas. So they look meager when I got done planting them. I had 3 plain the blue salvias, kind of dotted as my centerpiece plant, dotted toward the back of the container. And then I surrounded them, because these pots are up against a building, I surrounded them with 3 Supertunia Vista Jazzberry and 3 Supertunia Vista Bubblegum and 1 Sweet Caroline Sweet Heart Lime Sweet Potato Vine. And to me, that's kind of like a container classic, those colors. And using the Supertunia Vista Bubblegum, you see that a lot, and the Sweet Potato Vine. But you can't beat it. I mean, the growth on these was incredible. We went down there a month later to give you an update of what growth had occurred, and those planters looked fabulous and full. Kind of in that same area, and I didn't plan on talking about this one, but there was a similar shaped planter, and it was on the north side of a building, and so completely different plants, but I used Surefire rose begonias and some white, I think they were snowdrift, caladiums right in front of the begonias, and those 2 plants were absolutely gorgeous as well. I really liked that. So I guess that's 7 containers we talked about today. So this year we have a lot of areas to plant up, a lot of containers to plant up. We have the whole area around the Hartley. We're going to be developing the area around the flower shed as well. So I'll be taking some of the things that I learned from the containers we did last year and most likely applying them to the new areas that we've created. And you know, a lot of times too, I like to change things up. Sometimes it can be hard. You find yourself in a rut of something that works well for you every single year. And if that is the case and it works, and you're happy with it, go for it. But sometimes it's fun to change it up too, because you can really figure out some really fun new things to look at. So anyway, that is it for containers, technically 7 that we looked at today. It's just fun to take a look back at things that you did the prior season or even seasons prior to that, just to learn. I don't know, I think I make new discoveries every year as to what works together and what I like, you know, and our style changes and evolves throughout the years as well. So it's fun to try out new things. So I hope you guys were inspired seeing these planters, and I hope you guys are having a great day. We'll see you in the next video.